How was it? Stories about famous people who changed the world.
Leonardo da Vinci, the man who saw the future. He was born on a quiet spring night, April 15th, 1452, in a small village called Anciano, near Vinci, in the rolling hills of Tuscany. No one could have guessed that this child, born out of wedlock to a notary and a peasant girl, would one day redefine what it meant to be human. His name was Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci, literally Leonardo, son of Piero, from Vinci. He had no noble title, no fortune, no formal family, but from the moment he opened his eyes, he began to see the world differently. As a boy, Leonardo was quiet, always watching, always wondering. He would spend hours staring at ripples in the river or the way birds tilted their wings in flight. He once wrote, "Look deeper, for everything is connected to everything else." While other children played, Leonardo collected stones, feathers, insects, not as trophies, but as mysteries. He would dissect lizards, sketch birds, and try to understand how life worked from the inside. His curiosity was infinite and inconvenient. His father, Ser Piero, was a respected notary in Florence, a man of rules and order. Leonardo's mother, Caterina, was a poor farmer's daughter who could not keep him. He was raised mostly by his grandparents, loved, but always, somehow, apart. He never learned Latin properly, the language of scholars. He had no access to university. He was, by every measure of the time, an outsider. And yet, that became his gift, because Leonardo learned not from books, but from the world itself. He studied clouds instead of scriptures, rivers instead of rules. He once said, "Nature is the teacher of all teachers." By the age of 12, his notebooks were already filled with sketches, birds in motion, water swirling in cups, human faces lit from one side only. He saw light, not as brightness, but as emotion. When he was 14, his father took him to Florence, the center of the Renaissance, and introduced him to Andrea del Verrocchio, a master painter and sculptor. Verrocchio saw something in the boy's drawings, something alive. He took him as an apprentice. In Verrocchio's studio, Leonardo learned how to mix pigments, cast bronze, and study anatomy from dead animals. But more than technique, he learned freedom. Verrocchio allowed him to ask questions, dangerous questions for the time. How does the soul move the body? Why do people cry? What is beauty? One story says that when Leonardo painted an angel in Verrocchio's work, The Baptism of Christ, the figure was so graceful, so alive, that Verrocchio put down his brush and swore he would never paint again. Even then, Leonardo's art was not just seen, it was felt. But he was also strange. He wrote backwards, from right to left, so that his notes could only be read in a mirror. Some say it was to protect his secrets. Others say it was because he was left-handed and found it more natural. Either way, his notebooks became mirrors of his mind, filled with sketches of flying machines, maps of human muscles, designs for cities that didn't yet exist. He was fascinated by everything, but especially by the impossible. He studied birds, believing that if he could understand flight, he could build wings for humans. He wrote about the sound of water, comparing it to music. He even tried to design musical instruments that imitated wind and rain. And though he was a man of the Renaissance, Leonardo's mind belonged to the future. One of his notebooks describes something resembling a parachute, another a robotic knight that could move its arms. 500 years before robotics. He even wrote about contact lenses, centuries before they existed, and imagined bridges that could fold and carry armies. But behind the brilliance was loneliness. Because he was born illegitimate, he was denied inheritance, education, and acceptance by the Florentine elite. He never married, never had children, and seemed uninterested in wealth. He wrote once, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." Those weren't the words of arrogance. They were the sigh of a perfectionist who saw infinity and knew he could never capture it. As he grew older, people began to whisper about him, about his beauty, his strange habits, his love of animals, his refusal to eat meat. He was one of the first recorded vegetarians in history, writing that he could not bear to harm a living creature. He would buy caged birds in the marketplace, only to set them free. To many, he seemed otherworldly, a man both of science and soul, of reason and wonder, of the earth and the sky. By the time he turned 30, Leonardo da Vinci was already becoming something no one had ever been before, a man who refused to be one thing: painter, inventor, philosopher, dreamer. A boy who once saw patterns in river ripples was now sketching the patterns of the universe, and his journey, the journey of the greatest mind in human history, had only just begun. Florence in the late 1400s was the beating heart of the Renaissance, a place where art, science, and faith collided in a single golden light. It was a city alive with beauty and ambition, and Leonardo da Vinci was right in the middle of it, watching, sketching, absorbing. He was no longer the curious boy from Vinci. He was becoming something far greater, an artist of the impossible. His sketches filled hundreds of pages: anatomy, storms, faces, inventions. But he was still searching for his masterpiece. For Leonardo, art was not just imitation, it was discovery. He wanted to capture the invisible, the breath between heartbeats, the soul behind the eyes. One of his earliest commissions was the Adoration of the Magi, a vast, swirling vision of humanity around the child Christ. But Leonardo never finished it. He rarely finished anything. Not because he was lazy, but because perfection for him was always just one brushstroke away. He once wrote, "Art is never finished, only abandoned." Florence adored him, but he wanted more: space, challenge, freedom. So in 1482, he left for Milan, carrying a silver lyre shaped like a horse's head, a gift for the Duke Ludovico Sforza. He didn't introduce himself as a painter, but as an engineer, listing his designs for bridges, weapons, catapults, and machines that could drain moats or move mountains. And yet, when he finally painted, he did something no engineer could. He created emotion out of silence. In Milan, he painted The Last Supper, a moment so still, so human, that it changed art forever. Instead of halos and rigid saints, Leonardo painted men in shock, grief, disbelief. 12 souls reacting to one sentence: "One of you will betray me." He painted their faces from real people he met in the streets of Milan. He studied gestures, hands, eyes. He wanted truth, not holiness, but humanity. But Leonardo's experiments with new paints made the masterpiece fragile. Within 20 years, The Last Supper began to peel from the wall. He had broken the rules, and art itself. Still, the work was revolutionary. For the first time, faith looked human. It was a painting that made you feel. But Leonardo's genius was restless. He built mechanical lions that could walk and open their chests to reveal lilies for royal celebrations. He designed a diving suit made of pigskin and bamboo tubes, centuries before the first submarines. He dissected human bodies in secret, studying muscles, veins, and the chambers of the heart. He drew them with such precision that his sketches would later help modern medicine. He wrote, "The human body is the best work of art." At night, he filled his notebooks with dreams of flight. He watched birds and wrote pages about air currents and wing angles. He even designed a helicopter powered by human strength, 500 years before the Wright brothers. But Leonardo's greatness was not in what he invented. It was in how he saw. He once said, "Painting is poetry that is seen rather than felt, and poetry is painting that is felt rather than seen." Every work of his was both science and soul. By 1503, he was back in Florence, older, quieter, but still driven by a mysterious new project, a portrait of a woman with a smile that no one could explain. Her name was Lisa Gherardini, wife of a merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. He painted her over years, studying her hands, her breath, her silence. He carried the painting with him everywhere, refusing to give it up. It was more than a portrait. It was a secret. Her smile was not joy, not sadness, but both. A moment between emotions, a soul caught in motion. The painting would become known as La Gioconda, or the Mona Lisa, the most famous work of art in human history. But few know that beneath the paint, modern scans revealed 3 different layers, 3 versions of her, one on top of the other. He kept changing her, refining her, chasing a perfection that only existed in his mind. He studied her like a scientist and loved her like a poet. People asked him what he was painting. He answered, "I am painting the air between her and me." It was perhaps the most beautiful sentence ever spoken about art. In those years, Leonardo da Vinci was no longer a man. He was a phenomenon. But behind the glory was isolation. He was admired but misunderstood, revered but alone. Friends said he often forgot to eat, that he would spend nights watching storms from rooftops, mumbling equations about light and shadow. He lived like a visitor from another time, half in the Renaissance, half in the future. And though kings and dukes sought his genius, Leonardo sought only one thing: to understand the meaning of creation itself. As he wrote, "Once you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, for there you have been, and there you will long to return." By the early 1500s, Leonardo da Vinci was known across Italy not only as an artist, but as a man whose mind reached beyond his time. He kept thousands of pages of notes, filled with sketches, equations, and ideas that would not exist for centuries. Leonardo wrote everything in mirror script, from right to left. It was practical for a left-handed man, but also private. His notebooks were not meant to impress others. They were letters to the future. Inside them were designs for machines that modern engineers can still recognize: flying devices, tanks, parachutes, submarines, even an early concept of a robot. In one drawing, he designed a self-propelled cart powered by coiled springs, essentially the world's first automobile. His mechanical drawings were astonishingly precise, but what made them unique was his obsession with nature. He believed machines should imitate life, that the wings of birds, the flow of water, and the muscles of humans followed the same laws. Leonardo said, "Nature is the source of all true knowledge." He studied water for years, how it moved, how it curved, how a drop fell differently depending on wind and gravity. His diagrams of water turbulence were so accurate that modern scientists have compared them to computer simulations. He also turned his attention to the human body. Leonardo obtained permission from hospitals to dissect corpses, something rare and controversial in the 16th century. Over his lifetime, he performed more than 30 dissections, documenting every tendon, bone, and organ with unmatched precision. He discovered how the heart's valves opened and closed. He drew the first accurate diagram of the human spine. He even suggested that emotions could affect physical health, a concept that medicine would only rediscover centuries later. His anatomical sketches were so detailed that 400 years after his death, they were used to teach medical students. But Leonardo's notebooks also show his constant frustration. He could visualize complex machines, but lacked the materials to build them. His helicopter couldn't fly, his tank was too heavy, and his gliders never took off. Yet every failure expanded his understanding. He worked for powerful patrons, including Ludovico Sforza in Milan, and later Cesare Borgia, a ruthless military leader. For Borgia, Leonardo served as a military engineer and cartographer, designing fortifications and detailed maps that were far ahead of his time. His maps were the first to show aerial perspective, as if drawn from the sky, centuries before aerial photography existed. Even his handwriting was an art form, clean, symmetrical, carefully measured. Leonardo's curiosity had no boundaries. He studied fossils in the mountains of Italy and concluded, correctly, that they were remains of ancient sea creatures, proving that land had once been underwater. He observed the age rings of trees, the flight of bats, the growth of hair and water plants. To him, everything followed a pattern, one grand design. But not everyone understood him. He often began projects that no one had asked for. Bridges that could move, canals that could carry cities, machines to lift cathedrals off their foundations. Many of these ideas existed only on paper, but each one showed how far the human mind could reach. Despite his genius, Leonardo never published a single book. His thousands of pages remained scattered in notebooks, hidden for centuries after his death. Some were rediscovered only in the 20th century, revealing that he had described the blood circulation system, the principle of flight, and even the reflection of light in the eye long before anyone else understood them. And yet, for all his brilliance, Leonardo could be inconsistent. He would abandon projects halfway, move to another city, start again. He worked slowly, sometimes frustrating his patrons. But his goal was not speed, it was truth. He once wrote, "He who truly knows does not shout." By his 60s, Leonardo's fame was immense, but he was weary of politics and constant travel. When King Francis I of France invited him to his court, Leonardo accepted. He packed his paintings, including the Mona Lisa, and crossed the Alps one last time. In France, he finally found peace. The king treated him not as a servant, but as a friend, calling him Father Leonardo. He gave him a house near the royal palace in Amboise, where Leonardo spent his final years teaching, designing, and writing. Even near the end, he was still questioning the mysteries of the world. He studied the flow of rivers, the movement of stars, and the mathematics of beauty. In his last notebook, he wrote one simple line: "Learning never exhausts the mind." It was the creed of a man who never stopped learning, even as the world struggled to catch up. Though his right hand had weakened from age or stroke, his mind remained as sharp as ever. He continued dictating notes to his loyal student, Francesco Melzi, filling pages with ideas about geometry, the flow of water, and the mechanics of life. On May 2nd, 1519, Leonardo died at Clos Lucé, with Melzi by his side. He was 67. Legend says King Francis held him as he passed, a story that may not be true, but one the world still wants to believe. After his death, Melzi inherited his notebooks, thousands of pages of drawings and ideas that mapped the structure of nature itself. Over time, they scattered across Europe, resurfacing centuries later as the codices, proof that Leonardo had imagined the modern world long before it existed. He understood the circulation of blood, the anatomy of the heart, the flow of rivers, and the flight of birds. He sketched machines that predated the helicopter, the submarine, and even robotics. But his true genius wasn't in invention. It was in connection. He saw unity between art and science, between logic and beauty. He proved that curiosity could be the greatest form of intelligence. Leonardo da Vinci's body rests somewhere in Amboise, but his mind lives on, in every artist who observes, in every scientist who questions, in everyone who looks at the world and dares to see more. As a well-spent day brings happy sleep, so a well-spent life brings happy death. He lived well, he dreamed endlessly, and he left the world infinite.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.